The following is a presentation of Western Farmers Electric Cooperative.
Good morning, wherever you're at. I'm Howie Jackson, Information Specialist with Western Farmers Electric Cooperative. Today here with me is Mark Faulkenberry. He's Vice President of Member Relations and Marketing. And we're going to get digging into Mark's Miles. It's a column that you're going to see in the Enchantment in New Mexico and also in the Oklahoma Living here in Oklahoma, which is where we are based. But we do serve 4 co-ops over in New Mexico. And so, Mark, we're embarking on a pretty big thing here. We're going to be talking once a month for the next 12 months about your EV journey. Let's just tell us what's going on.
All right. Hi, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. Basically, this is interesting. For about the last 3 or 4 years, I've been promoting and educating and working with electric vehicles. We've had numerous campaigns, but the problem was I wasn't living what I was preaching. I've been talking about this a while. I would drive up to location. I'd be sitting there in my GMC pickup, and here I'd be talking about EV with a school or somebody else, and they'd make that comment, well, we notice you're not driving an EV, Mark. So, I went back to management and said, look, really do need to do this. It's kind of hard to sell what you don't live. So that's kind of where the concept developed. But really, we started to realize we could use this opportunity. Here I'm a 63-year-old man and driving an electric vehicle, and I'm not just your normal driver. I drive over 30,000 miles a year. So management said, hey, take it, drive it, and write about the experience, and we hopefully can educate ourselves and educate the general public at the same time. I do think it's important. We're not trying to sell or promote EVs. We're really approaching this from a perspective of trying to help consumers make a well-informed decision. So over the next 12 months, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do some kind of cool stuff. We're going to pull a horse trailer with it. We're going to try to introduce to see if the vehicle can actually run my home off of it. We're going to try to explore what the opportunities are here so that consumers can decide, is that right for me or not?
Definitely. So we're going to talk about 5 things in today's episode. We're going to talk about doing the research before you make your purchases, evaluate your charging options, exploring tax credit, which a lot of people don't know about that. Contact your electric service provider. That's a big one. We're going to really dig into that one, and then contacting your insurance company. And then we're going to all sum it up at the end. So let's just get right into it, Mark. Do the research. What are some of the things that a person needs to research? What's maybe the want versus the need? What's the first thing you looked at?
I don't want to be stuck on the side of the road, and you hear these nightmare stories and different things come about. So to me, range was really important. As I started looking at a vehicle, and again, I'm a pickup guy. That's what I need to perform the job that I have and the various things we do. It was all about range, and this kind of introduces in what's called range anxiety. And it's, can I get to that next location and get a charge and feel comfortable? You got to realize the charging infrastructure that's out there today, there's not one on every corner like there are gas stations. We're fortunate in Oklahoma that they're about every 50 miles apart, but it's still one of those things you have in your mind. So range was really important. And most of these vehicles have different sizes of battery packs, but each of those comes with a different price tag. So it starts to affect that total owning cost. So to me, getting the extended range really wasn't a want. It was much more of a need, and therefore it kind of set a bigger bogey of what the total owning costs really are for me. The other thing, I'll point out there are a lot of really handy calculators that you can use to try to understand this before you go and buy the vehicle. The one that works well for me is we just use Choose EV Oklahoma, and trying to set a realistic expectation for us, basically on the miles I drive and the estimated cost difference between charging at home and other options, save over $3,000 a year. So those were the things that were important to me, is looking at what the total owning costs were so that we can help consumers make those decisions. And most importantly, making sure I don't end up on the side of the road calling a tow truck.
So what vehicle did you decide on, and what type of range or battery pack did you end up choosing?
I ended up choosing the Ford F-150. I wrote in the column, it was kind of humorous. My dad for a while had a Ford dealership, and he'd rolled over in his grave if I'd bought that Rivian or that Chevy. But the Ford F-150, it's a well-known name, great credibility and the stuff that comes with it. If you'll remember, we had a Ford F-150 in its early development here in the state of Oklahoma when we first launched. So we've been looking at that truck for quite a while. I'm kind of a Ford guy, and that's what we picked up. The 2 battery packs, I got the extended range. has a 312 kilowatt hour battery that sets in that estimated range. So what I'm seeing is between 3 through 26 on a daily basis.
So, Mark, the Ford Lightning offers something that a lot of manufacturers may or may not offer right now at this stage of the game, and something about intelligent backup power. What's that all about?
Yeah, it was another one of those factors we talked about earlier. Basically, Ford claims, and we hope to explore that, that this truck has the ability to run my home during an outage situation for up to 1 to 3 days, depending on what I select to run and use out of it. I think about it. You got a battery. It's got 312 kilowatt hours in it, and you know how many kilowatt hours your house used. But what their claim is if you'll pull less than 9 kW of capacity, that it will run your home. So we plan to demonstrate and show that if we possibly can in a future call. Very, very intriguing because again, if you don't have a generator and you can run your home for a few hours, that's pretty handy.
And sometimes in Oklahoma, that's all you need is just a few hours, maybe something blinked and, they got to work on the substation or whatever. I know at my home, sometimes it's not a long outage, but maybe 5 or 6 hours. And that 5 or 6 hours, if it's in the dead of winter, or if it's in the heat of summer, that could really come in handy. So let's talk a little bit about quenching that range anxiety. So what are some of the different charging options that are available out there?
Well, the first, and it's the one that you'd look at predominantly is home charging. Ford has with this truck, it came with a charger. It's unique because of that battery size and that decision I made. This charger is 18 kW. But home charging offers a lot of flexibility. Most of your utilities are offering some very attractive rates, incentivizing you to charge that vehicle at specific times because of the capacity that it represents. But man, it's so convenient. I mean, just think about it. You go home, you plug in your vehicle in the garage, you get up the next morning and then you're on fuel. You're on full, and you've done that at significant savings that rate offers you to do that overnight. Um, like I said, pretty handy. Another feature I thought was pretty cool is the ability to start the vehicle in your garage when it was really cold and heat up the inside of your vehicle before you ever go out and get in it because you don't have to worry about any emissions or anything in the garage.
Right. And so not only home charging, but we're seeing around the country, not just in Oklahoma, but folks, their employers are putting in some workplace charging that employees can charge for. Sometimes it's a benefit, sometimes they can charge for free, sometimes it's just a regular paid station, but it's almost like it's exactly like having a gas pump there for employee use. They can pay for their gas, or maybe it's a perk for the employee. So let's just talk a little bit about that workplace charging.
Yeah, I mean, if you're evaluating, obviously, if your employer offers workplace charging, especially as a perk, I have some friends in Georgia that their employer, that's an employee benefit. They get free charging. That's a game changer. You get to drive to work and be able to have no cost in that, but being able to go back and forth to work, it makes the total owning cost of the vehicle completely different. But yeah, at Western, we have workplace charging. We actually have 10 electric vehicles in our fleet of vehicles for the company. The charging was really installed to fuel those vehicles more so than the individuals that are driving. But you can, as an employee, charge your vehicle there. We also have DC fast to the side. So any of our employees that drive electric vehicles have a lot of options to look at.
That's awesome. And there's another one that's popping up all over the place. And in Oklahoma, like you mentioned, we have a lot of public charging available. So let's just talk about that public charging, and maybe also there's a little bit of pay to play that comes along with that public charging.
Yeah, public charging is unique in Oklahoma, and it's really based on a relationship that Western established with a company called Francis Energy. Francis Energy made a huge investment in the state, building out a statewide charging network. And so when you look at a vehicle, you can charge with like your home charging, these others, but this type charging is what's called DC fast. It's a level 3 type charger. These are things you'll become more familiar with as you look at EVs. But what it is, it's the ability to charge that vehicle much faster. Maybe in a 30, 45 minute, you can go from 20% to 80%, be able to move on the road. And having that infrastructure about every 50 miles is unique. As a matter of fact, Oklahoma is probably one of only 3 or 4 states that has that type of charging per capita in the state.
And so some of those public charging options out there, and they have apps that go on your phone I'm just going to rattle off a couple of them. ChargePoint, Electrify America, EV Go, Francis Energy, PlugShare, and Volta, which is interesting because it's a member of the Shell group. So Shell Petroleum understands what's going on in the world for sure. So there's some other things, and a phrase you're going to hear, folks, you're going to hear Mark and myself throw around a lot is that total cost of ownership. And so that is basically a big spreadsheet where you're going to add up everything you spend on the EV and everything you get back on the EV compared to what you would get, spend, maintenance, all of that on an internal combustion. And let's talk about tax credit options, Mark. There's some stuff out there that folks may not be aware of.
Yeah, it obviously it's another one of those things that if you're considering buying it, you want to know if this has tax credits on it. Give you an example. I put this in the column. Ford gave me the base price of a Ford F-150 Lightning compared to the base price of a Lightning within the Lariat package. And with the $7,500 tax credit, if you qualify for all that, there was only $1,275 difference. So when you start to talk about that total owning cost, the savings that you will acquire, if you remember, I said earlier, some of the savings calculators could show that I could be saving over $3,000 a year in fuel alone. Now, I drive a lot of miles, but that's how you start to balance and start to take a look. Is EV right for me? I mean, one of the things we didn't talk about it earlier, but our mission is to help people. We kind of had a motto is EV may not be right for everyone, but it might be right for you. And that's what we're trying to do is help you evaluate, how do I choose what mode of transportation I have? What are those economics? But to your point, this tax credit is one of those big, big factors knowing up front. Now, I want to mention one thing. When you look at that tax credit, you've got to evaluate the fact that with the Inflation Reduction Act that came about in 2022, things changed. When this thing first started, you got a $7,500 tax credit if you bought an EV. Now, the phrasing states you may qualify for a credit up to 7,500. And it's complex that I would really recommend that you would contact a tax advisor because, man, there's so many factors that where the vehicle is made, how many of those vehicles have already been sold, how much money you make, what your tax liability is. So it's not as straightforward as it was originally, but there are still credits, and you're going to want to know if they apply to your vehicle that you're looking at.
That's just straight money back to you, folks. So definitely, if it involves money, you definitely want to get somebody that works with money involved. And so see your tax provider if you qualify for one of those tax credit options. Now we're going to go into something that some people think about as an afterthought. I got this electric vehicle now. I need a charger, and I'm just going to put it in. Maybe I need to talk to my electric service provider, and that might take some time, Mark, as you found out.
Yeah, I don't want to get real deep into this because next month's column addresses everything that we experienced through that. But I'm going to tell you, it's extremely important. In my particular case, my electric service provider took over 2 weeks to be able to get back with me because of the size of the charger. You have to understand an 18 kW charger on my home was more than double the largest load that I'd ever imposed on my electric service provider. So when they started looking at the transformer that served my home and the underground service wire that came to my home and the metering that was on my house, all of those things in providing electric service, they have to evaluate, is it large enough to accommodate what I now want to put in my home? And knowing up front if there's going to be any costs is pretty smart because, again, it affects that total owning cost. For example, if you went and bought this vehicle and you didn't realize that the cost to install the charger and the cost of the upgrades were going to be a significant amount of money, you might change your mind. It might not be right for you. But that's why it's extremely important. And I can tell you, I've already heard and seen, even with what we call early adopters, and this is kind of a new evolving marketplace. I've heard of some nightmare stories where multiple cars were put in the garage and it damaged equipment. And those are just things that can all be avoided by reaching out to your electric utility, who should be very professional and being able to talk you through every aspect of helping you make an informed decision.
Electric providers want reliability, and if people on a block, so say there's three, let's pretend there's three homes running off my transformer, and every one of us get an electric vehicle and nobody calls the electric service provider. We're all going to be very upset with our service provider. They're going to come out and go, why is this equipment always blowing? Let's find out what's going on. And then, oh yeah, oh, I got a Chevy Bolt, and then somebody else down the road got a Tesla, and then the last guy on the line, he got a 18 kW charger for his Lightning. So this is very important, folks. Make sure you talk to your electric service provider. They're going to want to talk you through this, and a lot of them are going to have a rate. So Mark talked about charging overnight as opposed to putting a big demand. So just imagine it's 100 degrees outside. You get home at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Your AC is doing every single thing it can. And then, oh, I've got to go somewhere, and I'm going to go ahead and plug in that charger and get that thing fired up. So then there's an increased demand. Whereas if somebody gets home at 5 o'clock, they set that vehicle to charge overnight during a not as heavy demand time. It can really reduce the strain on the grid and possibly even save some money. We're seeing some providers, Mark, that are down around 4 or 5 cent energy overnight. Is that a correct estimate?
Yeah, in my particular case, my service provider offers a very clear signal to charge from 11 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning. So what I do is I program my vehicle so that I go ahead and plug in when I get home, but the vehicle sits there and says, okay, don't start charging till this very opportune time that we have. And by having the size of the charger I have, regardless if I'm clear down on the low end, that's why I went with the 18 kW charger, it will get me full during that period of time. Now, to give you an idea, that's 2.6 cents. It's kind of a carrot that they're dangling there. And then with the addition of whatever their fuel costs are. So in this particular month, I paid around 5.7 to 6 cents based on that. And the economics turn out really well when you do that. But, back to your point, Holly, the utility, you think about two periods of time when everyone gets home and when everyone gets up. Those are the two absolute most demanding times on the grid. And so the whole aspect is obviously your electric service provider wants to sell you electricity for this vehicle. It's going to increase what they sell, but they sure would like you to take and do it at the right time. And these rates are traditionally starting to show the proper time frames of when they want you to charge. Clear economic incentive.
So we've done our research, we've evaluated our charging options, we've even looked at tax credits, we've talked to our electric service provider, and there's one last element that we're going to talk about in this episode, and that's talking about contacting our insurance companies. Which insurance companies are we going to contact? Home, auto, both? Who did you contact?
I opted to contact both. Remember, this is a company vehicle, so I don't actually own it, but I thought for the column it would make sense to go ahead and contact. I mean, we see all sort of things. We hear a lot of stories. I just wanted to put it to bed, so I contacted my home insurance, let them know that I was going to be installing a charger in my garage, told them the different aspects, and what I wanted to find out was there going to be any impact on my premium or my coverage in my policy. I was pleased to find out that there was no increase in any of my premium cost. It didn't matter any way, shape, or form. Even my fire protection, everything else, everything was exactly the same as it was if I had an internal combustion engine vehicle. On the other front, like I said, I don't own this vehicle, but I thought it would be interesting to find out. And again, I was pleasantly pleased to find out that there was no additional cost for the auto insurance by owning an electric vehicle.
Let's just sum it all up and give some folks some key takeaways that they can take away for this month.
Okay. I mean, basically, I had four key things that we put in there. But first of all, home charging for somebody that drives a lot, it is essential. I mean, it's literally, we'll be looking at the economics next month, but what I'm seeing is it's 10 times cheaper than using the public charging network. So it's more convenient. You're able to do that at the luxury of coming into your home. You're on full every morning. But most importantly, it's all about the economics. It's so much cheaper to fuel your vehicle at that time frame. And like I said, when you drive like I do, I don't want to have to stop and publicly charge. I want to be able to come on home and be on full and get ready to go do my job. Another thing that was really eye-opening this first month is we had some really cold weather in January. And, you hear a lot of stories. And again, it was nice to be able to experience it personally, see what was going on. But you got to understand, this is one of those things that is it right for you or not? You will lose about, depending on your make and model, it indicates from the research I saw, almost 40% of your range that you're losing when it's extremely cold because the battery's not as efficient, but also because you have to use a lot of that battery to heat and or cool your vehicle. So you have to think about those extreme weather conditions and how that affects the range of the vehicle. Was another reason that the extended range was very important to me. But I experienced about a 25% reduction in my range, and that was driving around in about 5-degree weather. Didn't have any problems operating the vehicle or anything that came with it. Another thing that I found interesting is we've heard a lot and saw where people were not able to charge the vehicle. I intentionally went down and did a public charging when it was 5 degrees outside. It seemed as though it might have been a little slower, but it was able to go ahead and charge the vehicle and put me on down the road.
So, Mark, sounds like it's been an experience this first month. But just what do you think overall? How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think that if I use my brain and I'm able to take a look forward, it's going to work. But I have to say, I love driving the vehicle. I mean, geez, it's really fun to drive. You hear this all the time about different people. You've driven internal combustion, and when I was younger, it's a pretty nice rides. Different stuff. Everybody likes it. I mean, like I said, I'm a little bit redneck from southeast Oklahoma, but you got to realize this truck goes from 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds, and it's rumored that it'll do the quarter in like 12.9. Now, I can't confirm or deny that, but I can tell you, having driven the vehicle, I've already seen a couple of situations. I was in a situation that was really foggy. I got going around a truck with a trailer on a highway, didn't realize from the fog that I was coming up on an area that I couldn't pass. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, whoa, there's another vehicle there. So I got on it just like I normally would in any truck, because you're trying to say, I got to get across. And I have to admit, man, it was the torque was amazing on how quick I got around the other vehicle. Matter of fact, I looked at him and he looked at me as I was coming around, and he just turned his head like, what in the world just went by me? So, from a safety feature, forget the speed and everything else goes with it. It's been a pleasure to drive, and it's a lot of fun. I get a lot of questions about it too, and some comments. That's been interesting.
So this has been Mark Smiles doing your homework. We've got another episode coming up next month, and I'm just going to throw this in there, Mark. There's a drag strip over by Noble that does a run what you brought in the spring, and we may have to go over there and run what we bring, and we might be able to verify that speed legally on the drag strip and see if the people at Ford that gave us that number are correct. So I'm Howie Jackson for Mark Smiles. He's Mark Faulkenberry.
And this is Mark Smiles. Happy trails till next time.